Hey, John Gilroy here. As an executive, you are 5 times more likely to be targeted than other employees. Looks like it's not just rainbows and unicorns at the top. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. We have a special edition of the podcast today. We are recording this at the offices of Fortreum in Lansdowne, Virginia. Our first of 3 interviews focuses on protecting executive leadership from cyber threats. Our guests are Richard Fleeman, director at Fortreum Labs, and Ricky Freeman, manager at Fortreum Labs. Gentlemen, I guess it's kind of lonely at the top, huh? What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
They're coming at you. Well, what we want to do is maybe define the problem and offer some solutions for our listeners on this one. And 5 times more likely. Is that a good figure? Is that too low or too high? What do you think?
I think certainly it's on the money. When you look at the statistics, right? Some of the statistics show that 74% of human error, right, are contributed to our, breaches of customer environments or personal environments. I think, executives obviously are high value targets, and they're going to be more likely to be targeted from that upper echelon of cyber, right, crime, versus your standard kind of scammer, right? So like if I were a scammer, I would spend my, cycles on going somebody that is a much higher value target than the regular kind of Joe on the street, right? So I think that's pretty good statistics there.
So Richard, classic guy in Americana named Willie Sutton, and the cops arrested him and they said, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "That's where the money's at." And so is that why people are going after high-level executives?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously executives, right, have more influence within their sphere of, employees, right? So if to your point earlier, if I got an email from my executive, you're more likely to respond than some low-level person in the company you've ever, never heard of. So yeah, to answer your question, there's the sphere of influence that they have within the organization, outside of the organization, right? Span of control over financial and things of that nature that lead to those individuals being a more targeted, right, person within an organization than say a low-level person, right?
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Ricky Freeman, this weekend you're going to go downtown and maybe see some monuments, maybe walk into a coffee shop and hear people from different maybe intelligence agencies talking. And they're going to use terms like OS int and hum int and all kinds of int. So OS and open source intelligence. So if someone says they're going to find everything they can about Richard Fleeman and use open source, what are they going to do?
Yeah, so you can start very basic with just Google dorking. So you're
there's a word for you.
Exactly. Between that or data brokers, you might be able to find like addresses, phone numbers, emails. Then you can kind of go from there to continue your attack where you use, an email to find additional data where they might have social media accounts on and kind of build off of each one.
Richard Fleeman, one of my heroes is a guy named Dr. Chase Cunningham. And brilliant guy. He's written a bunch of books and all kinds of patents and everything. And he's been screaming in his podcast about deep fakes and deep fakes and deep fakes. And I picked up my phone yesterday. Marco Rubio, he got deep fake, didn't he?
He did, yes.
This is what executives have to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of a presentation that we've been working on, we've actually created a deep fake of our CEO. And we're going to play it for the crowd tomorrow. And it is like, if you didn't know it, you would not realize that was not him speaking, right? So, yeah, in terms of Marco Rubio, we know that that was kind of a low-level, unsophisticated attack where they did employ some AI and deepfake methodologies around some voicemail sending and stuff like that. But based on our understanding, I don't think it played out to be, successful. But to your point, it's becoming a more and more relevant attack vector that people need to be cognizant and aware of and defend, right? Trust without verify, right? Verify, hey, did you really send this? Was this an email that really came from you before you do anything that's major within the organization, transferring of funds, proving of certain distribution of, or, whatever mechanisms that you have in place. Just ensure that you've got, dual control over those so that you have the verification on the action, right?
So Ricky Freeman, I had a question for you. If you're an executive for, let's say, a technology company in the Washington, D.C. area, and you get deep faked or someone compromises your identity, the personal digital risks, they're also in addition to the and oh, by the way, there's an enterprise security risk, but there's the personal risk as well. So these can be a big wallop against an executive, can't they?
Yeah. So it definitely builds off of each other. For example, if you have family members, a spouse or children that are posting upcoming travel events or vacation plans online, then an attacker could spearfish that executive's email and then use that compromised email account to pressure finance into sending a wire transfer that's urgent for a deal that is time sensitive.
No, that's really a good one, man, because there's been actually a couple different instances in the news where a target had been spearphished, right? Mm-hmm. An executive or whatever. And then you've got these big wire transfers that have been completed, right? That have left the organization. And then at that point, it's the recovery on those is very difficult, right? And so there are actually several different examples of that in the last 4 to 5 years within the news that somebody has impersonated somebody within the company that is in that sphere of influence, right? And solicited funds or payments and actually were successful, right?
And if you just look at the Washington, D.C. area, I think everyone knows about the OMB breach. I think maybe everyone in this room has been involved in the OBM breach. Mm-hmm. And emails can get out there they don't realize. Some people are not savvy enough on LinkedIn, and they may put a personal email address on there. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, that is fodder for the bad guys to go after you. Yeah. And so I think we can spend the next 3 hours talking about the bad guys and attack. Yeah. And I think we've established an attack. So I think the real question is, so Ricky, you're on a boat with someone, you're fishing, and they turn to you and go, "Oh, what can I do, Ricky? It's the end of the world. I'm going to get attacked." So give me a first step and go back and forth, you two gentlemen. What to do next? Just give me one thing they can do.
First thing, you definitely want to check your default privacy settings for all your social media accounts.
By default, you mean just make sure you don't have your email included in the release, or?
Well, so that, if you're posting things on your social media, that it's not exposed to the entire internet. That way, it's just for the individuals that you want to see it.
So, Richard, MFA, I always thought that was Master in Fine Arts, but MSA, multi-factor authentication. So is that one step too?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different things that you can use. And, like Ricky said, is just taking a look at what you're posting on social media, be cognizant of what you're doing there, employing the use of a password manager. A lot of password managers now have the ability to incorporate MFA. So you can use like one-time codes, passkeys, that kind of thing. And the benefit to using a password manager is not only like storing that information, but you then can use a unique password for every site that you have your email registered to, right? So that way, if my email does get compromised within a breach, which it has, right, those passwords are always unique. And what people tend to do is use a common password across all their platforms. And, the one key to rule them all, right? And so if I were to successfully breach your personal data, get that email address and password, and a typical user will use that all over, I can start password spraying and trying to get access to other areas of their life, right? Not just their social media, but their banking accounts, their insurance, right? Their investment accounts, those kinds of things. So it's really good to kind of shift your mindset, right, in general, from a kind of just, I don't want to say lackadaisical, but just making sure that you're aware of what you're posting. Be cognizant of the things that you're doing in your everyday life, because to your point earlier, the personal information really can be coupled with organizational information to build an attack profile, solicit that information, and then we can start doing some profiling on passwords. Right. And then there's tools out there where we can do spraying and, password guessing. Right. And then get access to not only just your personal side, but then your business side, because everybody's very public in what they do these days on LinkedIn. So, and it's not real hard to figure out an email like standard that a company has employed.
So, Richard, you kind of tripling the tongue used the word passkey. And there may be listeners that are confused about the difference between a password and a passkey. So what is the difference?
Yeah. So A passkey is a form of a second factor, right? And it's usually a computer-generated token, so to speak, where you generate and you know your password. The passkey is not known. It's just stored within a password manager or a hardware key so that it is your second form of verification, so that the system knows that, yes, you've got a legitimate user ID, a legitimate password, but is this really you, right? And so you can verify that, yes, it is me through the use of a passkey, which is a software-based kind of token.
So, Ricky, when you're downtown tomorrow or the weekend, you'll drive by the Pentagon. And people in the Pentagon like to use the phrase attack surface. And they talk about attack surface, virtually, talk about attack surface space. And so I guess an executive should view his attack surface like a military guy does. So when it comes to, what Fortreum can do for an executive, how would they reduce that attack surface for an executive?
Yeah. So we go in and we do manual testing analysis where we kind of look through everything that we can find, both from a personal and corporate perspective. We kind of chain that together to find, the most likely attack path. And from there, we can write recommendations on how to approach those different vulnerabilities that we do find.
Richard, there's a phrase that is used on your website, and it's called cyber hygiene. It sounds kind of confusing. I don't know what that means. So what is cyber hygiene for you?
So I like to think of cyber hygiene as, we think of personal hygiene, right? Our personal upkeep, taking a shower, right? Brushing our teeth. Cyber hygiene is like that, and the way that we manage our digital footprint, right, is ensuring that our digital exposure, both from a personal and a corporate perspective, right, are well maintained and kept so that that information can't be leveraged or used against you in an attack, right? So that's part of the services that we're offering is taking a deep dive into an individual's, right, attack surface, and looking at it through that dual lens of personal and corporate and making that tie together, and then identifying those weaknesses where they can go in and shore up that information leakage, right? Whether it be through social media, through data brokers, through other various sources, dark web, and identifying those things and ensuring that we, can help them maintain that hygiene around their digital footprint.
So, Richard, when you discuss training in the cybersecurity industry, there are many strongly held opinions about the value of training. Some people say, you get a bunch of PhDs in a room and train them, and sooner or later, there's always going to be 4% of people going to be suckers for a phishing attack. So what do you think? Think training has validity here, or will there always be that 4% that are going to be suckers to a spear phishing attack?
I think, as we mentioned earlier, the human factor, the human element is always going to be in play. So there's always going to be that risk profile around humans, right? Where humans are involved, that's going to exist. So I think training is important, but I think you've got to make training much less of like a checklist approach like we do today, and actually show the value in why you should care about these things. And then as part of that training, I think we need to start shifting people's mindset away from, just, this is just work. And, it actually encompasses your entire life, right? So taking that dual lens perspective, overlaying the training to show the importance that, hey, spending time now up front, is a lot less time consuming than spending time on the back end post breach, right? Because there's money involved, there's loss involved, reputational damages, those kinds of things that you're always going to be a victim of as part of a breach, right? So incorporating training, to your point, is still valid. I think it's necessary, but it's also getting away from, I think corporations are so narrowly focused on the corporate, right? Footprint, assets, technology, protecting those, but it needs to be extended to include the people, right? And I think that's really what we're trying to communicate here, is that it's the entirety of the attack surface of a person that should be put into perspective as part of those training, as part of those security programs, and then executing those in a manner that, people feel like they get value out of it and they're just not completing a checklist.
So, Ricky, there's this concept here about safe social media practices. And so let's say I get a rapid promotion. I'm the CEO of this company here at Fortreum. That would be pretty ridiculous. And you're assigned, Ricky, go to Gilroy's house and sit down with his wife and 3 kids. And so where would you start? I mean, you'd sit down and say, review social media profile, multi-factor authentication? I mean, is there a step-by-step? And what's the baby steps and what are the hard things to do?
I think the first thing that you should do is definitely make sure that, your private data is not public.
Mm-hmm.
So, Google yourself, Google your family members, make sure, there's not things like phone number or your address that may be exposed on like a data broker website. Those you can opt out of many times. Additionally, like social media accounts, you want to make sure that if it's your personal private account, then you want to keep it that way. You don't want to be oversharing with, travel or places that you go. And then additionally, with another important one is like account legacy or legacy accounts rather.
Mm-hmm.
You'll want to look at maybe old accounts that you don't use anymore and make sure that they're not active because many times they don't have MFA enabled. And with that, you might be in a data breach. You might be using like an old password that anybody can access.
Richard Fleeman, you're director of the labs here. So I would imagine you're familiar with the deep web and the dark web, whatever you want to call it. So would that be part of the service you offer here? Is that, well, I'll tell you what, Joe Smith, we'll take a look at different places that may have your information. Is that part of your service you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only do we look at the publicly exposed information that's on the internet, we actually have done a lot of work around development of some tooling that we do scraping of the dark web.
It's a very dangerous topic here, isn't it? This is kind of a sensitive topic.
It is. There's a lot of stuff out there that, normal people don't even know about.
Right.
Information that you mentioned the opium breach earlier, or the OMB. And, there's just that's just publicly available information, right? That stuff is brokered and sold on the dark web, right? Not only that, but there's other information out there that, we can identify as part of those dark web searches that could potentially be related to the people that we're, doing this service for. So, and we would notify them and then, work to, it's really hard to expunge that information. It's a lot easier to opt out on a data broker site, right? But when you get in the dark web, that's typically illegal territory, right? So there's a lot of things that we can identify, but there's not a lot of things that you can actually do beyond reporting to, law enforcement agencies, that kind of thing.
So, Richard, my mom used to have a phrase called a bull in the china shop. Yeah. And I think if I personally decided that, well, I'm just going to go on the dark web myself and find out what's going on with my identity, I would probably compromise myself even more because I don't know what kind of games are played on there. And so it's kind of a sensitive conversation to have an executive, isn't it? I mean, go on the dark web and reveal to him or her information that it's not all positive.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of sensitive information typically on the dark web, right? That's the whole intent is there are cyber gangs out there or whatever you want to call them, organized cyber rings that are, building profiles on people, whether it be financial data, personal data, right? And that stuff is being brokered or sold on the dark web, right? Most people don't even know how to get to the dark web, right? There's a whole process on just getting into the dark web, understanding what's there, being able to traverse that information, right? And that's why we've specifically, Ricky here has built out a lot of tooling that does that in an automated fashion for us so that we don't have to go in there and click around and look, right? We've got scrapers that are identifying this information and we can bubble that up from an informational perspective, right? As part of our deliverables to our customers.
Yeah. So Ricky, there's every town has a bad part of town, and you don't want to get out of your car in a bad part of town. And I think that's what the dark web is. And so what you have done is you've structured some tools that will automatically go in there and not put a person at risk. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It'll go in and it scrapes different forums or marketplaces and collects that data all into a centralized location where we can index it and do searches and, use that into actionable intelligence.
Rich, I think this is proof of concept. If I go knock on someone's door, Mr. Executive, Sally Smith, well, there could be compromised information about you on the internet. And then she's going to say, show me. And all of a sudden, Ricky can run a tool. And then all of a sudden, you're going to get a pretty credible customer here, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty amazing what we can actually identify about a person that's publicly available and not so publicly available, right? So as a proof of concept, we did exactly that with our owners here at Fortreum, and we dug down and identified several key pieces of information, right? And Ricky mentioned some legacy accounts. We were able to leverage some of that data to get access to some other sensitive areas of their lives, right? Based on, things that we were able to identify about the person and then elicit through information that we gathered about that person, and then developed a profile, employed the profile, and then we're able to kind of identify those things and gain access to certain things that we shouldn't have gained access to, right?
Yeah.
So if we can do it, anybody else can do it. It's just a matter of time and resources, right?
Yeah, it's a kind of a dangerous society we're in, where people want to have visibility, but they want to have everything protected. And so if you're in a company that's trying to protect someone, you're kind of putting like at the razor's edge, Ricky, I mean, you have to be very careful about what you present, what you don't present, and you're doing this for someone's best interest. But it's difficult to even create tools can do this, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Richard, if people want more information about executive cyber hygiene, they should go to Fortreum.com and start their journey there. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some information out there that that'll be helpful. We're also working on putting together, in collaboration with other individuals in the cybersecurity industry or organization, some tools and resources that everyday people, right, can put into practice to help protect themselves, right? Because this information is out there on everybody. Everybody is a target these days in 2025. So, yes, visit our website. There's a lot of resources there. We're working within the industry to build out further resources. Those aren't yet available yet, but yes. So
what was fascinating is that I can go to my company website and I can run a tool, find out how fast it is. I can run a tool, find out how many broken links there are. I can run a tool and look at the HTML. I can run 4 different tools, a lot of them free. Mm-hmm. And then if I want to go deeper, then it's the pay model. I think that if you could have some kind of a tool on your website that an executive can go to and say, well, let me put my name in here and just get a little baby pass here and say, whoa. I mean, and I don't think people realize, I think they've been naive in many ways about releasing information. And even if they're not naive, I talked about Dr. Chase Cunningham, PhD, patents, books, smart guy. His name was released in the UMB. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, even if you are careful and you don't need it, things may change in 6 months. So, Ricky, looking into the future, how many times a year, how often should an executive maybe sit back and do a review of their security posture?
Yeah, I think depending on the level, quarterly for the more higher level executive, and maybe annually for your managers or directors.
So, Richard, what about insurance? I got insurance in my car. I got insurance in my house. I got life insurance. Can I get is it identity management insurance? I don't even know what it'd be called.
Yeah, honestly, there are some things out there, but I've been dealing with insurance lately on some other things. I'm not a huge fan, but I'll just put it that way. There are some things, there's some things that a traditional person can use, like Norton LifeLock. You can lock some of that stuff down, right? Not to call out individuals, but organizations like our company, we get offered certain tools that you should take advantage of if you have the ability to, right? So in terms of cyber insurance, I really don't know if there's there is the Norton LifeLocks and things like that do have limitations on insurance and what you can and can't in terms of coverage. But I think really taking that step to identify, just do some investigation on yourself, right? Look what's publicly available. Go to those data brokers, start opting out, right? If you reduce that attack surface, you're going to get a lot more value than it would be to buy insurance, because then you're still dealing with the cleanup on the back end, right? Yeah. So our message is really to get ahead of this and, identify those weaknesses, shore those gaps up, and, make yourself less of a target. That way you don't even have to worry about the insurance. And if you do, then there's something really went sideways, right?
Yeah.
So,
my experience with insurance companies are trying to protect themselves and
exactly.
everything else, and it has to be almost a personal thing. Ricky, it's not like you can go to a checkbox but you have to really take a look at all your accounts and make sure your family knows that, hey, we're going to Florida for 2 weeks. That doesn't make your home vulnerable to attackers. This has been an interesting discussion. So if you're listening to this and you want to get more information on executive cyber hygiene, go to Fortreum, Fortreum.com. And I'd like to thank our guests, Richard Fleeman, Director of Fortreum Labs, and Ricky Freeman, Manager of Fortreum Labs.